Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Coffee with Katie. Got my Fairy Loot Winter Night Trilogy mug and some lipstick, ignore that. Today's coffee is from Bones Coffee, that company, and it is From Dusk Till Donuts, and it is a glazed jelly donut coffee. Honestly, for a while I was like, that sounds pretty gross, but I eventually broke down and wanted it because it was a donut coffee, and it actually tastes pretty good. Letting it waft a little. Today I have my reading journal in front of me, which means that I'm going to be doing my May reading wrap-up. Because today is Memorial Day, and while I may get some reading done today, I doubt I'm gonna finish anything. So, here it is. Speaking of which, if you've never seen this, this is the Lit Joy Crate reading journal. This is the back. It says, we lose ourselves in books and we find ourselves there too. And this, I bought this specifically from them because of the way it's laid out. You open it up, it has a reading profile, which is just like your favorite genres, etc., which is kind of cool. And then it has reading goals. So any type of reading goals you may have, you can write them there. Books you want to read, reading recommendations, just a bunch of stuff. And then it has this really cool section of, it's called bookshelves. And basically you write in on the little spines the books that you've read. And then I think I have one here. And then you write the page number of where your review is in the journal. And I just thought that was really handy and cool. And you can like color them in and stuff. And there's quite a few pages of it. And then they have book reviews. So I'll show you one right here. So you write down the name of the book, when you started it, when you finished it, how it made you feel, what it taught you, if it taught you anything, chunk for your reviews, your star rating, and then it has a place where you can actually put quotes that you thought were cool or that you liked. So kind of like annotating, but instead just writing them down in here instead of tagging them in a book. You could do both, I guess. It'll have like thoughts and feelings pages in between, and then like little pictures with quotes. I don't know, it's really cool. And then it also has these. It has little tiny pages with dots, which reminds me of math, and I have no idea what it is, but they're there. I think it's just gonna be really great to journal and see all the stuff that I read by the time I fill it up. It has really cool like literary reading locations. So like Geoffrey Chaucer's in London. I don't know, this journal is so cool. And then books by season, it says use the following pages to write down the titles of books you love to read during certain times of the year. I don't know why I just went over all that, but I just think this thing is so cool, and I'm really excited that I've just started using it because it's pretty new to me. Okay, but you want to know what books I read this month. So I mentioned this in my last reading wrap up, but I did finish the Inheritance Games by Lynn Barnes. Is that her name? Jennifer Lynn Barnes. And I liked it. The only thing I will say about it, I think I gave it like 3 or 4 stars, probably 3 stars. Basically what the premise is this girl who comes from nothing and is poor is written into this billionaire's will, and she's going to inherit like all of his money or a big portion of his money and his estates and all of his properties if she stays in the Hawthorne house for, I think it's a year. Might be 2 years, but I think it's a year. And the way it was set up in my head, or just kind of, it was probably my fault for having the expectations, but the way it was set up in my head was that she was going to be playing dangerous games while in this house, and that she was going to have to compete and fight against all of the brothers that are the grandsons of this man, and they all want the fortune for themselves. So I thought it was going to be like a huge, almost thriller. Like they're constantly going to be attempting her on her life, or like playing these dangerous games like poisons, something like that. It was not like that. It was I think there's like a couple of times where her life is in danger, but it's more so a puzzle type of a game, and they're kind of all trying to solve it together, like separately and together. And it wasn't as high stakes as I thought it was going to be. Again, I thought it was going to be like somebody trying to assassinate her every day or something like that, and that's not what it was. And that doesn't make it good or bad. It's just not what I wanted it to be, which isn't the author or the book's fault. I just thought it was going to be more high stakes and her like getting poisoned and trying to find like the antidote, like that kind of a thing. Or like them sending her in this maze and everything in this maze is trying to kill her. I don't know where these thoughts came from, but that's kind of what I thought it was going to be, and it was not that. But all in all, I thought it was good, but I wanted it to be more murdery. And there was a lot of like, I didn't expect this either. There was a lot of kind of love interesty stuff with the grandsons. So they're all like the same age. There's a lot of like love interest stuff with them, and they're all these beautiful, talented billionaire kids, and I just didn't love that about them. I didn't care a lot, and I just kind of wanted to know how the story ended, but I'll probably continue for this. I think the second book comes out this year. I'll probably continue, but I don't know when, just because it wasn't as attention grabbing for me as I thought it was going to be. So it was okay. And if you like contemporaries with like a little bit of mystery and like puzzle solving and problem solving, you might really like that book. And I said I was going to mention that because I read that at like the very end of April after I had already filmed my reading wrap up. So there you go. The next book that I read in May was Lady Midnight by Cassandra Clare. And that was the first book in the Dark Artifices series. And basically what you're following is Emma, who is Emma Carstairs, who is, I guess I shouldn't spoil anything in case you haven't read the rest of the books. Emma Carstairs, and she's kind of painted to be this female Jace Herondale type character. So she's very powerful, very talented at fighting, and she, in a lot of the ways, is better than other shadow hunters just because of raw talent. And I think she talks about this in the book, Emma herself. She talks about how it's not raw talent, it's that she trains so hard. So basically her parents have died, and this happens in another series, but that's the main focus of this. Her parents were murdered, and she's convinced that it was not from the Dark War and it was from some other force, but nobody's looking into it because they've just chalked it up to the Dark War. And so she's trying to solve her parents' murder, finding clues, finding sources, finding ways to explain this. And the whole first book is her trying to do that. And it also has this dynamic with her parabatai Julian, so they're guy and girl parabatais, which I guess is not that uncommon, I'm not sure. They are trying to solve this mystery, but she's also doing it against the Clave's wishes because she's not supposed to be looking into it. And also in this world, the fairies are not supposed to work in tandem with the shadow hunters, and they're just kind of supposed to ignore each other because of the cold peace. And it's just kind of following that dynamic of trying to figure out what happened to her mother and father while dealing with the Clave and this cold peace. And there's also this dynamic of her and Julian, I don't think this is a spoiler, but her and Julian kind of falling for each other, and the tension between that because parabatais are forbidden to fall in love or to like romantically feel things for each other, and all the complications that come with that. I liked this book. I don't think it was my favorite by any means. I liked Julian much more than I liked Emma because I've never been a big fan of the cocky, impulsive characters that don't think things through and they just kind of make stupid decisions. I've never been a fan of that just because I do think things through and I am very logical. So I just don't vibe well with that. It doesn't mean it's good or bad, but she does make some poor decisions. But Julian's character I really liked because he also lost his parents and he has several younger siblings. So he's basically like the father figure to those siblings. And so he has to take on a lot of responsibility, even though he's like 16, 17. And I just really liked his dynamic and how he has to be responsible and he has to do these things and he has to think about them before himself. I really like that aspect of his character. So for me, that was the most interesting part of this series. Well, I guess the first book so far is Julian and how he wrestles with his feelings for Emma, needing to be a parent, having to take care of the whole institute because it's run by his uncle who's having some issues. And I just feel like the weight and the responsibility on his character is really intriguing to me. The villain kind of made me sad, honestly, because I really liked the character in the beginning. I thought they were really funny, but then towards the end you find out they're the villain and all these things they've done, and that was not a fun time. And they're, I guess, out of the picture now. I can't really be sure, but they're, I guess, out of the picture. And so I'm not sure how the series is going to continue, but obviously I think there's going to be more tension between the dynamics in the Institute. And then there's a whole other side story quest about a kid they find. So yeah, there was a lot of interesting aspects of this. Not my favorite Shadowhunter series yet. Maybe it'll get better. I think it's going to be hard for me to top the Infernal Devices. But I am obviously going to continue. I'm planning on doing that soon. But overall, it was a good read. The next book I read, which it's a very short book and it was just kind of a fun thing to do, was The Lives of Saints by Leigh Bardugo. And this is all like these tiny short stories about the saints in the Grishaverse. And it does talk about the Darkling and it does talk about Sancta Alina. It was kind of fun. It's just little like short stories about like this one saint fighting a demon and drowning this demon and then saving this town, and it was just random stuff like that. It's really hard to rate this because it's just short stories of the saints in this universe, so it's all fiction inside fiction. A lot of them were honestly kind of gruesome and a little troublesome, but I guess kind of dark, but it was really interesting, and I would recommend reading it. I don't think it's anything to write home about, but if you really like the Grishaverse and you just want to pick something else up that has to do with that universe, I think it was fun. There's really not much more to say about it. It was very short. And I actually listened to it on audiobook, and they had 2 narrators, and for all of the male saints, it was narrated by Ben Barnes, which I thought was a great idea, and he did such a good job. If you don't know who Ben Barnes is, he's the one that plays the Darkling in the show. I would say I would recommend listening to it on audiobook just for that. The next book I read was The Beholder by Anna Bright. Now, I gave this book 2 stars. The premise of this book painted it in a way that she is publicly rejected by a love interest, engagement, something like that, and that she is forced by her stepmother to sail across the seas to find a new suitor. So it's kind of painted as like a bachelor type of situation. But what ends up happening is she only meets 2 of them, and that's the whole book. I don't know how many there's supposed to be. There's either 2 or 3, maybe 4. There's like this background war going on with the Imperia is what it's called. It does not talk a lot about that. It's just like her main focus is I need to find somebody and go home so I don't have to go to the Imperia and so I can go to see my dad. And so she's just trying to rush through this process. She doesn't really care about the process so she can go home. I think this is fantasy. It may just be dystopian. Regardless, I was not a big fan of this story. I felt like the main character had no personality. What is her name? I can't even remember her name, if that tells you anything. I cannot remember her name for the life of me, and I read it this month. So I don't know, mysterious female main character. I feel like she had no personality, and that she was just whiny and miserable, which, okay, if somebody's kind of forcing me into a bachelor situation, would I be happy? No, I would not be happy. But I feel like she just wallows and doesn't do anything to help herself, and then wants everyone to fix her problems for her, or tell her what to do, what to say, how to act, like everything. And I'm like, if you're gonna be a ruler, I think her title was like Seneschal Elect, if you're gonna be a ruler soon, which is what you're planning on doing, you should probably be able to function on some level by yourself. She also seemed semi-dramatic with the love interest. So there's 2 love interests. One lies to her about who he is because he doesn't want her to interact with him because of his title. He wants her to interact with him because of him, who he is as a person and who she is as a person, which I can understand that, especially when there's a lot of high political stakes, high political drama, war going on. I think that's a spoiler, I should tone it back. Basically, she was pretty dramatic with her love interests. There was like a small betrayal, and instead of like taking the shock of that in, being hurt by it, and then moving forward and deciding what to do, she's just like, I'm done with you. And it just felt like the moment a rough patch happened, she would burn their chances. And it happened with both love interests. Which, granted, I know that she's a ruler and she has to make hard calls, and if your trust is betrayed in some way, shape, or form, that's really difficult. If you've read it, let me know if you feel the same way. I also feel like the world was not explained well, and you're just kind of left wondering what's gonna happen next because you don't really know what's happening in the world, and suddenly it's like, oh, by the way, there's this giant war, and it's like, okay, but you haven't really talked about what that means. I don't know what's happening. I don't know. I don't know what her name is. I don't think she has any personality, and I don't know what's happening. There's a second book. I don't know if I'll pick it up. I might. We'll see. I'm sorry that was really rambly. I'm gonna have to do a separate review on that book because I want to talk about things, but I don't want to spoil it for anybody. So I need to just stop here. The next book I read is The Six of Crows by Libby. I loved this. So I thought I was gonna really like Six of Crows because I love the Grishaverse and I love the world of the Grishaverse. This is not my cup of tea in general. This is not my genre. So it's a fantasy setting, yes, but it's about a heist. And heist stories are not usually my thing. I'm more into like magic systems and mythology and magical creatures type stuff. And while there is still like the Grisha elements in this, it's primarily a heist story. But I loved this. It was so good. And I know everybody hypes it up and everybody's really excited about it. it's not new for somebody to love this book, but for me, I was caught off guard because I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. I thought the characters were done really well, and I felt attached to most of them, which is honestly hard to do for me. I might feel attached to a couple of them, but not all of them, and I felt attached to a majority of them. And I thought that was interesting considering the trope is not my usual thing. I loved the characters and their dynamics and how well it tied into the Grishaverse, because I didn't honestly expect it to tie into the Grisha much at all, and it does a lot more than I thought it would. I think one of my only qualms was that I felt like Nina and Matthias's resolution or semi-common ground seemed to come out of nowhere and seemed to be a little rushed, and I felt like it should have taken more time for it to happen, and it just kind of felt like we're fighting, we have a semi-truce because of this one thing, and then it's like flipped. I don't know if I buy that, but I really enjoyed the story. Just felt a little whiplashy to me. I think one of my favorite quotes from this book was that we are all someone's monster. So yeah, I would recommend you read this if you've been hesitating because it's a high story. I would pick it up. I do want to read Crooked Kingdom too, but we'll see when I get to that. The next book I read while I was on the beach was All the Stars and Teeth by Adeline Grace. So this book was a lot of fun. I will say that I listened to this on audiobook because we were doing a lot of driving while we were there, and it was just easier for me to listen to it while we were driving. We had 2 3-hour stints of driving, let alone like little things in between here and there where we listened to this. And I will say that I think the audiobook does this a disservice. I don't have a lot of qualms with audiobooks usually, but the narrator, I did not like the narrator. Somebody on a review described the narrator as a Britney Spears voice, and I totally understand what they're talking about. And I felt like the way she did the guys' voices was really cringy and like raspy and weird, which I understand. You're trying to do a guy's voice as a female and it's gonna be a little bit awkward and different. I just really didn't like it. The audiobook, I didn't like the narration. I think I would have honestly liked this book a lot more had I not listened to it. If you're not sure how you're gonna feel about this book, I would recommend you read it instead of listening to it, because if you have issues with narrators, I think that would become an issue for you. And I think I gave this book 4 stars. It might have been higher had I not listened to it, because I felt like some of the details were lost on me, and the imagery is so beautiful and so well described and so like nautical, ocean, colorful, like beautiful, that I feel like some of that was lost on me because I was listening to it, not reading it, not picturing it as well, because the voice was kind of grating on me. But aside from the narration, this was beautifully described, super atmospheric, sailing and beachy, much more gruesome than I originally thought. And the magic system is cool, and I think a lot more of the mysteries is going to be uncovered in the next book. So basically what this book is about is the main character, Amora, lives in a kingdom where soul magic is what reigns, and she has to do a demonstration of her magic and things go wrong. And she joins a pirate on a journey to try to figure out what to do and how to save her kingdom from destruction because of this magic. I thought this book was really good, and there was a lot of similarities with another book I'm going to mention, and reading them, I think it was only because I was reading them side by side that I saw so many similarities, and it was kind of bizarre to me, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But overall, this world was beautiful, the magic system was interesting, much more gruesome than I thought it would be originally, and I am looking forward to reading the second book. Another book I read, which is a nonfiction book, is Chasing Vines by Beth Moore. And basically it's like finding your way to a fruitful life. So this is a Christian author, Christian book, and it's just talking about how you deal with hardships, how you grow through them, and how hardships can actually develop you as a Christian, how they can develop you as a person, and how they can help your faith. And going through hard times can give you character and perseverance. This book was very good. I don't like rating these like on a star scale because I don't like rating nonfiction in a star system, because it feels wrong to me, because this is either somebody's advice or somebody's experience, and that just feels weird to rate. I will say this was helpful, and I think if you're going through a season of your life where you feel a little hopeless, you feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, that this would be a good book to pick up and go through, because it talks about hope in hopeless places. The last book I read, which I actually just finished, I think it was today or yesterday, is Roar by Cora Cormack. I did start this on the beach, which was also really fun. I gave this 4.5 stars, and if you don't know what this book is about, I should probably get into the descriptions before I start talking about these books in the future, but this book is about Princess Aurora, which is hilarious, but I love her name, Aurora, and she is supposed to be a stormling, which means that they have power to control storms, and they can take the storm heart and use it to protect the villagers from these magical storms that come. Except she's having issues with her magic, and she does not have any magic. And she's being forced into a marriage, kind of cover up this secret so that she can kind of glide by on his powers in this alliance. And instead she feels betrayed and runs away from this marriage and goes seeking storms with storm hunters to try to uncover her magic. I really loved this story. The magic was really fun, and I felt like the magic system was very interesting with the storms and the storm hearts. So when you defeat a storm, you take their storm heart, and it's like a jewel or a rock, and then you have that affinity for that storm, and you can control that more easily now. And so a lot of stormlings will like wear all of these like jewels, rock type things on their harness or on their armor or on themselves and necklaces to show how many storms they've conquered and to show how many storms they can protect you from. And that whole aspect was really interesting to me. And the storms are magical, so they're described as kind of being almost like animals. So they're like vicious, they're coming for you. They have a vindictive spirit, like stuff like that. And overall, for a fantasy, I think this book is very underrated because it was a lot of fun for me, and I really enjoyed learning all the aspects of it. And I loved that kind of battling the storms was how you can get your magic. There were parts that I think were intentionally not explained well, or just not explained at all, to kind of build for the next book, which is Rage, which is up there. And I think those answers are going to kind of come with that book. So I think some of the hints were like dropped. And when I say dropped, I want to say like this far into the book is when you learn about some of them. I think that must be intentional. I think some of the things that were left out were the motives of the pseudo villain and what the actual villain is, because a lot of that is not fleshed out. It's hinted at, but it's hinted at well past halfway in the book. That you're not really sure what's going on, and it's not really explained, but there's hints of explanation. So I think it's all kind of come to fruition in the next book or so. Cassius he's maybe a villain. I don't really know. I think he's kind of a villain. He's the fiance in this arranged marriage, and Cassius. And I actually really like him as a character, but after she leaves, runs away from this arranged marriage to try to find her magic, he's not talked about a lot. He isn't like, there's a couple instances where he comes in and out trying to like figure out where she is, etc. But he's not really talked about or in the book a lot after that. And he was one of my favorites in the beginning just because I found him really interesting and what his motives were, again. But you don't really get to see a lot of that. And there's some pieces of information that are fed to you at the end. But I really want to know more of his story. So I'm hoping he's going to be in Rage a lot more. And then the second villain, you don't really know who he is or what's going on with that, but he's obviously powerful and terrible. I also found this book to be pretty funny, and it had a lot of actually really good quotes in it. Maybe they're not like super original, but I thought they were really fun. For instance, I think this is funny because I'm not a morning person, but one of the quotes is, "Rise and shine, princess," and her response is, "I will murder you." There's another quote that says, "It was a fierce and glorious glare indeed." So there's just like little bits of humor. There's many more quotes that I think you would pull out, and pretty inspirational quotes, but I thought it was really cool. There's also, before every chapter, there's this little thing. So there's a break in the chapter and then there's a little quote. And all these little quotes are from something in the world. So it's some like a church in the world, or a book of fantasy, or like a book of tales from this universe. And I thought that was a really cool touch. Oh, so there's this one that's The Tale of Lord Phineas Wolfram, and she talks about how she loves that book and she carries it with her because it's like a book she's read over and over and over again. And I just think it's so cool that they made an excerpt from this book and put it in here, and they do that a couple times. I just thought that was really well done. So as promised, I'm going to compare the two similarities. So the reason I thought these two books were kind of similar is one, her name is Aurora. Coincidence? I think not. I don't know. She thinks she has control of her magic, loses control of her magic. She thinks she's supposed to have magic, doesn't understand why, does not have magic or loses magic, however you want to say it. They both go on journeys with these like thieving, scallywag type characters to try to find their magic, who's probably a love interest at some point. Both princesses, and running away from their kingdoms to try to save them, to try to figure out how they're going to control their powers, and then come back and save the kingdom. Would I have put that together if I was not reading these at the exact same time? I don't know, but the fact that I was reading them at the exact same time, I could not help but pull out similarities to both of these. So I do think if you liked All the Stars and Teeth or Roar, you should read the other, because I think the similarities are enough that you'll like the story, but the differences are also enough in the magic systems, the worlds, that it still brings a different piece to the table. All right, everyone, well, that is it for today's video. Let me know all the books you read in May and what was your favorite. And if you've read any of the books that I mentioned and want to talk to me about them down below, that would be super fun. I'm probably going to do a couple book reviews on some of these. If there's a specific book review you're wanting from the ones that I mentioned, please let me know and I will try to get that up for you. And I do have a book haul and some other stuff coming up soon, so please just stay tuned. If you like this video, go ahead and like it, and if you want to see more, you can go ahead and subscribe. Stay caffeinated. Bye.